What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to The Haunted Beard. Thank you for joining me. Today, I want to give you my review and ranking of all 5 episodes of Season 6 of Black Mirror. One of my favorite shows, and was really excited that Netflix decided to drop a new season and just recently gave them a watch. Wanted to give you my thoughts, so here we go. So kicking things off, coming in at number 5 for me is the episode Demon 79. And this one is about a story from this young woman. Her name is Nita. She is a department store worker, and she just kind of lives this average sort of mundane life. This one takes place, I'm assuming, in 1979, somewhere in the UK, I believe. And it's kind of set amongst this political, social, uprising type background where, there's all sorts of turmoil and whatnot. One day while she's on her lunch break, she discovers this talisman, which is this little domino-like thing that happens to summon a demon. And so she summons a demon, and it tells her that she has to sacrifice one person over the next 3 days in order to prevent the apocalypse. I really liked the idea and the concept here. However, I just wasn't a big fan of the execution. And the main reason for that is just the tone, as it tries to juggle this sort of very serious situation. Obviously, she has to save the world and prevent the apocalypse. But there's just some kind of this lightheartedness to the whole thing. It just sort of has this lighthearted tone, this kind of almost humorous, comedic lightheartedness to it that I just didn't really jive with. And when the demon first shows up, it looks like an actual demon. However, then it turns into this guy from one of the famous 70s bands. And he's wearing this outrageous outfit. He looks like he belongs in the Bee Gees. And so it's like this over-the-top, outrageous scenario of her having to prevent the apocalypse. And I feel like it would have been good if they would have went one way or the other. Really take it totally serious and very sort of, sinister and suspenseful, or go completely kind of goofy and over the top with it. And they don't really commit one way or the other. They kind of toe the line between it's kind of serious, but there's also, we want to have a little bit of humor and lightheartedness to it as well. And so just the tone and the overall vibe of the whole thing, I just didn't really jive with a whole lot. I think what we get, though, I mean, it looks nice. I like the setting. I think they do a good job recreating that time period. I think the performances are pretty good for the most part, but I just didn't really jive with the whole tone and the execution of the concept. There's also some scenes, too, that are kind of awkward and uncomfortable, and I know they're played off that way intentionally, but again, I just didn't really like that vibe they were going for. They kind of just devoid the suspense and just go the awkward, cringy sort of route. And I just didn't really like that creative choice. And then the way it ends too, and I won't get into spoilers, but they kind of take it a specific direction to where it kind of becomes this sort of love story. And I just didn't really like that choice either. And so overall, this one for me was just kind of middle of the road. So that comes in at number 5. I'm going to give Demon 79, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. And so that was my least favorite from season 6. Next up at number 4 for me is Maisie Day. And this one tells the story of a paparazzi played by Zazie Beetz, who tries to track down this famous celebrity by the name of Mazey Day, who has disappeared out of the spotlight, and nobody really knows why, although we, as the audience, find out that she is involved in this hit-and-run accident and is sort of kind of hiding out and trying to cope and deal with it. And this one clocks in at only 40 minutes, which is the shortest episode of season 6. And overall, I had a decent time with this one. This one has a little bit more of some not really super in-depth themes, but just kind of touches on some of the ethics of paparazzi and just that whole lifestyle. As at the beginning, Zazie Beetz' character decides she no longer wants to be a paparazzi because she feels bad for these people, only now she's got this big payday she's looking forward to if she can get a photo of this Maisie Day person. And the make it or break it with this one really kind of depends on how you like the end. And there is kind of this twist ending. And I won't get into specifics or anything like that, but I feel like what they do with this one is they show you something earlier on in the episode, only they don't show you everything. And so I feel like the filmmakers here and the screenwriter are being a little dishonest by intentionally keeping us from seeing something. And so it just felt a little disingenuous and dishonest. So by the time we get to the reveal at the end, it's just like, okay, I guess it just doesn't really quite have the impact that it should because of how they handle a certain event that happens earlier in the episode. Again, I'm trying to be vague here, but so anyways, it's all going to kind of depend on how you know, handle or what you think of sort of the final reveal. But it was all right. I like to a degree that this one has a little bit of a horror element to it. So that I'm obviously kind of always a bit of a sucker for. So I appreciated that a little bit. I think that there is some pretty questionable CGI here. And there's a particular sequence towards the end that just doesn't really look all that great. And so overall, like I said, had a decent time here. There's not a whole lot else here that really stands out. Like I said, it's pretty much all going to come down to kind of that final twist there. And so overall, decent time, enjoyed it enough. It's nothing great. I'm going to go 6 out of 10 for Maisie Day. Next up at number 3, and I will say we're jumping up a tier here for the rest of these 3. These last 3 I really quite enjoyed. But number 3 for me is Joan is Awful, and this one stars Annie Murphy and Selma Hayek. And I enjoyed this one quite a bit. This is how I think you handle sort of the comedicness of an episode like Black Mirror, as this is very sort of a ridiculous concept that they really go for laughs, but still has some good kind of suspense and surprises and thrills in it throughout. And this one tells the story of Joan, played by Annie Murphy, who is a boss at this like environmental type company, and she doesn't really have a great life. She's not really in love with her boyfriend. She doesn't really love her job. She just had to fire somebody. And so she says in one of the sessions with her therapist that she doesn't feel like the main character in her own story. She ends up going home that night, turning on the Black Mirror equivalent of Netflix, which is called Streamberry, and finds a show called Joan is Awful. And this story happens to be her life played out exactly as that day's events played out, where Selma Hayek is Joan. And obviously with a setup like that, you can imagine just all sorts of craziness ensues as she's trying to figure out, you know, how in the world is this happening? And this one is fun too, because I feel like this one really touches on themes that are kind of present in today's world, what with everybody having to sign these terms and conditions things with every sort of app or social media platform that you sign up for. And it's like, who knows what we're all agreeing to? And so it's kind of this like reminder and warning against the privacy stuff and the terms and conditions gone completely out of control. It also talks about deep fakes, and it touches a bit on, you know, free will and stuff like that. And so this one kind of has some fun themes and ideas going around that I think are pretty kind of relevant in today's world. But like I said, this one here is quite hilarious. I think Annie Murphy's performance is really good. Just her reactions to everything I thought were just pretty great. There's a scene about 40 or so minutes into this one where she actually meets up with Selma Hayek, and they're both just like freaking out and just all sorts of craziness. Just some of the dialogue in the exchanges between them and their reactions with all the insanity that's happening, I just found pretty funny, and it was just consistently funny. I laughed quite a few times. And so I really just enjoyed the writing, and the performances were just really good. I also really like that I feel like Netflix made this sort of like self-aware, self-burn joke on themselves in the movie, where one of the characters says, in reference to Streamberry, again, the Black Mirror version of Netflix, they've taken 100 years of cinema and reduced it down to an app. And I was like, that's pretty clever. So I like that joke. What she ends up doing to get Selma Hayek's attention later on in the episode is pretty hilarious. It's very juvenile. Maybe I have a bit of a juvenile sense of humor, but I thought it was pretty funny. But this one is just kind of this wild, crazy ride that's funny, and it does have, I think, some good kind of surprises in it. And I think it has a pretty good kind of twist at the end there as well. And so that's why Joan is Awful sits at number 3 for me. I'm going to give Joan is Awful 7.5 out of 10. So yeah, this is a pretty good one. I dug it. Next up at number 2 is Beyond the Sea. And this one is the longest episode that clocks in at 80 minutes. So this one's, I mean, pretty much like a feature-length film. This one stars Josh Hartnett and Aaron Paul. And it takes place in this alternate 1969. These two astronauts have to deal with this tragic event. And the first kind of reveal that we get here, and you find this out pretty early on in the episode, is that these two men are at home with their family and in space at the same time through these like robot doppelgangers. And so they have the robot version of themselves at home with the family, and then they hook themselves up to the machine, and it really like transfers their consciousness, if you will, over to their real selves in the spaceship. And so right from the get-go, you got kind of this pretty cool setup here and concept, and I really like what they do with this one. This one is the slowest paced. It is the most kind of dramatic of all the episodes, as it really kind of focuses more on relationships between the characters. And this one really goes to some interesting places and definitely kind of touches on themes of identity and love and just, relationships and things like that. And so it definitely is slower paced, but I think it needs that time to kind of really sort of establish and build the relationship with the characters. This one has, I would say, the most kind of fleshed out and complex characters. It also touches on themes of like grief and loneliness and things like that. And this one really kind of wraps you in with the dramatic element to it, as it's really kind of a sort of a relationship drama kind of built within this sort of sci-fi type world with a, sci-fi twist to it. And for the most part, like I was enjoying it. I was on board, and I thought I had an idea. I thought I knew pretty well how this was going to play out and how it was going to end. But boy, was I wrong. And so I won't spoil it, but it gets to the ending and it starts playing out exactly how I had thought. And then it doesn't. And oh my goodness, the ending to this episode is not something I will forget very soon. It is pretty shocking and just, yeah. So I think this is a good episode, and then I think it's made great and memorable by the ending. And so that's what really is kind of the cherry on top here. And so, like I said, this is a good one. It's slower pace. It's longer. It's more of a drama with kind of a sci-fi twist to it. It's about just relationships and grief and things like that. But man, the ending here is pretty crazy. And so, yeah, that one, I think just the ending itself really bumps this one up another level to where I think Beyond the Sea turned out to be pretty great. And so that's why number 2, I'm going to give Beyond the Sea an 8 out of 10. But coming in at number 1, my favorite episode of season 6 is Loch Henry. And this one is just the most straight up horror episode, which just speaks to me. And man, oh, I had a really good time with this. So this tells the story of a young man and his girlfriend who go back to his home in Loch Henry, which I believe is in Scotland, and they're there to film this documentary. And he ends up connecting with an old buddy at a pub, and they tell the story to his girlfriend of the reason why their town is slowly dying and is this notorious place, as there was this serial killer in the town, and it has just completely destroyed the town's reputation and economy. And then his girlfriend persuades him to make a true crime documentary on that story. And this thing was just right up my alley. Not only do I love horror, but I'm a huge true crime fan as well. And so this was just sending me all the vibes that I just ate this thing up. It's just really great. I think the story here of the killer in their town and just the whole history there, I think this one's cool because like you get sort of a true crime documentary within this episode of Black Mirror. And so it's like you kind of get like this 2-for-1 deal. And I just thought it was fantastic. And so the background story they set up with the actual true crime incident that occurred on their town, I think is just this really creepy and disturbing and horrifying story. So that definitely hooked me. And I like this whole kind of documentary type angle to where there's like this montage where they're getting footage and then editing it on Premiere Pro, which is the program that I use. And so there was kind of this just like personal connection there to where I was like, yeah, I know what that's like. I've been there. I've done stuff like that. This one too, I did not see sort of the final twist coming. And man, it is pretty messed up and pretty dark and disturbing, but really good. And two, I think the final image, the final shot that this thing ends on is pretty haunting and very memorable as well. And this one too is just it's a bit of a reminder that, like, you know, true crime is all the rage, but like there's real people that this has affected. There's real people with real feelings who have lost loved ones, and we just consume it for entertainment. So I think just the final image that this ends on is just really kind of poignant, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. I think there's just a lot to be said about the final images. It's pretty impactful, pretty powerful, but man, this thing I thought was just pretty great. I really, really enjoyed Loch Henry. So for me, I'm going to go probably 8.5. I'm close to a 9, but I'll go 8.5 out of 10 for Loch Henry. I think this is a really solid episode. So those are my thoughts. Hope you enjoyed that. Hit me up down below. Let me know your ranking. What did you think of season 6 of Black Mirror? Would love to hear from you. That's all I got. Like always, hit that subscribe button. It's all horror and thriller content coming at you on The Haunted Beard. And I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.